Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I am joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Henry. The high of Comic Con has worn off, and the high of Shang-Chi is about to begin.
That's right. Indeed. Today is September 2nd, 2021. You can catch the Comic Sauce Podcast on social media at Comic Sauce Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And as you were alluding to, Christian, today we're going to talk about SiliCon, formerly known as Silicon Valley Comic Con. But yeah, we were there. We were at an actual in person comic convention in the year 2021. How about that? We're here. We survived. This was just this past weekend at the San Jose Convention Center. So I think I mentioned this was formerly known as Silicon Valley Comic Con, SVCC, now known as SiliCon. So counting the SVCC years, this was the fifth year. It started in 2016. It's been running annually since, except for last year because of COVID. So yeah, this past weekend, the 2021 SiliCon was the fifth year. And it was a very different year for this convention. And I think the fact that it even happened at all was an accomplishment. You know, having a convention during a pandemic, not an easy thing to pull off, right? But they did pull it off. It did happen. And we were there. We were actually there. Okay. So, yeah, this is a little bit different than our typical episode where typically we're talking about like a show or a movie, but this was a convention and our first convention in a long time. So, yeah, we can kind of do this kind of free form. Um, yeah, Christian, what are your initial thoughts on SiliCon 2021?
All right, my initial thoughts. I think at the end of the day, I had a lot of fun. I think the cons can just be a pretext to just hang out with your friends to get together. We had a kind of big group of about, let's see, 6 people, around that number.
Yeah,
And it was just kind of nice hanging out with your friends, cosplaying, getting a really good picture, walking around the floor, seeing people. After doing this, you know, many years before, and of course we couldn't get it last year because of the ongoing pandemic. Um, it was nice to be back overall. I think that is my thought. Is at the end of the day, it was just great seeing everybody, and I had fun.
well said. Yep, I agree. You know, on the level of a cool hangout with good friends, total success. You know, it was great. A lot of us got dressed up. Yeah, we should talk about our cosplay a bit. Um, in the early planning stages, we were thinking of doing a group cosplay that never really came together, but a lot of us did show up in costume, which was a lot of fun. What were you dressed as, Christian?
So this year I kind of went with my tried and true costume. I was the Riddler from Batman. I had honestly, it's a costume I got at Party City, but that costume and that has got me through many Comic Cons, many like Halloween parties. I love that costume. And
Awesome.
I think this might have been the swan song of that. I'm thinking of finally retiring that. But it was nice and comfortable. I wanted to do something else, but I'm kind of busy with a few other things right now, so I kind of forgot and just kind of wanted to go with something something comfortable.
Very cool. Yeah, you've gotten a fair amount of mileage out of that costume. Gotten your money's worth, right?
Oh yeah, and then some.
Nice. And it was cool seeing you in a villain costume because I had a villain costume also. I was dressed as Baron Zemo from the Marvel universe. Yeah, it was kind of a hybrid MCU slash comics Zemo because the mask was very much from the MCU. It was very much like the Baron Zemo mask from Falcon and Winter Soldier. But I also had this very luxurious leopard print scarf with it, which was much more reminiscent of the comics Zemo. So we were a villainous duo for SiliCon this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of fun dressing up, hanging out with friends. Um, yeah, the very beginning of the convention when we all showed up on Saturday morning, got into costume, snapped some photos, and entered the exhibit floor. Um, that was a blast, getting together and experiencing a con in person for the first time in what feels like ages. So yeah, that was super cool. Um, Now let's get to the con experience as a whole because this year's SiliCon, like I was saying before, was quite different from before. It was kind of abbreviated. First off, it was just 2 days. Historically, this has been a 3-day convention. So it was just Saturday and Sunday. So it was shorter. What else can we say? In a lot of ways, it was an abbreviated convention, right? It was shorter. The attendance was down for a number of reasons. Like they actually limited the attendance, right, because of COVID. But people who wanted to go, I think that was like less anyway, also because of COVID, right? So it wasn't as crowded, which, in some respect was a plus. What else? There really wasn't any food or drink in the convention center. Like we didn't see any concession stands at all, right? Um, and I'll take it a step further. There wasn't even any functional water fountains. It was very stripped down. um, yeah, I'm not saying we went into like an apocalyptic situation where there's no lights or no running water at all. Not saying that. The bathrooms were fully functional and everything was well lit. Everything looked great. The convention center still looks great. Um, but I'm telling you, it was it was a different experience. You could feel it. You could feel that this convention was kind of a shadow of its former self. Now, will it always be like this? I don't think so, but it kind of felt like the convention was like, I don't know, just sort of like a holdover, something to to keep a place in line, to keep the train going, right? But it wasn't its like full self. Like the next one maybe we'll be back to the convention we know and love, but this was just sort of like our best crack at it, and everyone sort of just acknowledged that it's just a diminished experience. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think a shadow of its former self is very apt. Um, it, I think since it didn't happen last year, of course, and after all this time waiting, um, I would say this year, 2021's version of Comic Con felt less like a big triumphant return and just more of like making it work. I definitely felt like, well, this is just kind of what we have. We're just gonna just do it and just see how it goes. Um, which was definitely disappointing. We've definitely at Silicon Valley Comic Con before. They've brought in some like really big guests before, Jeremy Renner, Stan Lee, to name a couple at the first one.
Yeah.
And of course, there's many more. But this year, they had definitely less guests and a couple canceled. I think the big guests, Adam Savage, Lou Ferrigno, and William Shatner, are kind of mainstays of the cons. They go there every year. And then, of course, Lana Parrilla from Once Upon a Time. I don't really watch Once Upon a Time. So I didn't have much interest in that personally, although many people did, and that was cool. The big guest I was interested in ended up canceling, most likely because of COVID, and that was Charles Martinet, who's the voice of Super Mario. Very iconic voice.
Yeah.
I love Mario, grew up on Mario, and I was really excited to get my copy of Super Mario Brothers 3 on the NES signed by him. And so that was pretty deflating, honestly, to get the news that he was canceling about a week or so before the con was happening. And so I think that killed a lot of my hype personally.
Yeah.
And so, but there a lot of hard work went into this con. You can tell, like, a lot of people really wanted to make it happen, and so definitely props to those who showed up, who made it happen, who worked behind the scenes. But yeah, I could, even though you understand and you there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. I still couldn't help but be a little disappointed by the outcome, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And Charles Martinet wasn't the only guest cancellation. Notably, Javicia Leslie, aka Batwoman, also canceled. Again, presumably because of the COVID situation. And yeah, totally agree. The whole thing had kind of a dark shadow over it. Now, look, you and I have been to this convention since the beginning, 2016 onward, and we've seen the highs, 2016, 2017, 2018. This was a top notch convention. I mean, it rivaled the best conventions in the country. And in 2019, there was kind of a dip. There was a bit of a dip in quality. Like the guest caliber went down a bit, and just the way the convention was run was not quite the quality we're accustomed to. And that was 2019. Now, there wasn't one of these last year. And when we first heard that they were bringing this back, we were all super excited. We being myself, you, and Porfirio. And I think there was this expectation of things getting kind of back to normal, and that feeling of, oh, we're back, this is back. And the COVID situation, namely the Delta variant, really put a damper on things, right? I mean, there's that meme going around, right? Like my fall plans versus the Delta variant, right? We've all seen those. I mean, this is like a perfect example. Like,
oh yeah,
right? Like the plans, the expectations for this convention were pretty high. We were all planning it out pretty early. Like I was saying, we were thinking of doing a group cosplay, and the optimism was running high. And then the reality kicked in, and actually, that makes me think of like the few weeks leading up to the convention. You mentioned the cancellations. That was one thing, right? It's like, oh shoot, some guests are dropping out of this thing. And then I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but I noticed that I started to get some kind of spammy type emails about like the convention sort of like uh advertising some random shit to me. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I got that
Yeah.
too, actually. Now that you mention it.
Yeah. And it made me think like, oh shit, that they're like kind of in trouble. Like maybe they're just not getting the ticket sales they need and they just need to generate revenue any way they can. It just felt kind of desperate and a little troubling. And then I got my wristband in the mail, you know, and in the past, SVCC has shipped these kind of fancy wristbands, right, with the RFID chip in there, and you just kind of swipe into this high tech station, and off you go, right? A little different this year, you know. Um, this year it was a paper wristband, and so I guess what I'm saying is like the convention itself wasn't like terrible, but just the the you know compare and contrast to years past, it was pretty telling, right? It felt like a big drop off, and not only the weeks leading up to it, but the convention itself. Um, Ultimately, I think we had fun. And also, to your point, the people who did show up, ourselves, the attendees, to Adam Savage, to the entire SiliCon staff, the show guests, the vendors, huge A for effort. Props to everyone for showing up and making the most out of a pretty fucked up situation, yeah, props to all involved. I have zero bad feelings about anyone who showed up and did their thing. Yeah, even though I think we're kind of painting this picture of kind of a negative experience, I don't want to say like I had any sort of like negative customer service type ordeal. There's none of that. People were trying, people were helping each other out, and it was kind of beautiful seeing a lot of people in person, just trying to make the most out of things, right? Because I felt like everyone there wanted everyone else to have as good a time as possible, right? So let that be known, let that be said.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, we still had fun and like a big A for effort, but of course, there's COVID kind of just puts a big just damper over the whole thing.
Yeah.
That logistically, in terms of finances, in terms of who they can get, and of course, I guess the other big thing that kind of puts the other big current event that's kind of putting a big damper on the whole thing was just the amount of smoke everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I think smoke plus with this massive heat. So it couldn't help but kind of darken this situation. Um, I guess one thing I will say is that like everyone was very cool with masks as far as I saw, which was
Yeah.
kind of nice. Like you do see a few people like pulling their masks down every so often and things like that, but it never seemed like a problem. Um, there was hand sanitizer everywhere. It's about as good as I think something like this could have been without going completely fully online.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's a great point. Now, we've been talking a lot about COVID, and everyone's been dealing with this for a long time. But on top of the COVID situation, it was crazy hot and crazy smoky in San Jose this past weekend. So not only was it unsafe indoors, but it was also unsafe outdoors. So there truly was no escape from this danger, right?
Mhm.
I did a little screenshot on my weather app, and this is when we all went out for lunch. We kind of took a late lunch, like around 2:30 or so. And yeah, I took a screenshot of my weather app, and at 2:30 in downtown San Jose, it was 97 degrees with an air quality index of 152, designated as
Ooh,
unhealthy. So,
yeah, that's pretty high.
yeah, it was rough, man. So, like, in the convention center, like you're saying, people were good about masking up. We were certainly masked up. And, that can be uncomfortable when you're wearing a mask for hours on end. Um, so when it was time for lunch, what could have been a kind of nice break was almost rougher because, when we went outside, I certainly didn't unmask. I was wearing an N95 mask, which protects not only COVID, but air quality stuff too. So I kept my mask on to protect myself from COVID and the bad air quality. And we decided to go to Jack in the Box for lunch. And we thought, oh, well, we can go inside of an air conditioned restaurant that doesn't have this poor air quality. And they were not offering in restaurant dining. So um, a bunch of us got food to go there. I myself went to another restaurant to get food to go. And we weren't quite clear about the food situation in the convention center. So we just ate outside, right? And again, the air quality wasn't great and it was very hot. And it just all made for a pretty rough situation. We were definitely sweating while we're eating our lunch. And I was definitely like, a little concerned about the air we were breathing in because, of course, to eat, I had to take down my mask. And it was just a lot to deal with. It was a lot to deal with.
Yeah, you can say
So,
that again. It was a lot.
yeah, we didn't so much attend this con as we survived it, right?
We lived through
We
it.
lived it and we made it out alive somehow. Um, Also, side note, there was a lot of dog poo on the sidewalks of
A
downtown
lot.
San Jose. Yet another challenge we had to deal with. And yeah, it was a lot. It was just a lot.
Both you and me stepped in it.
Yeah, yeah. They got us. They got us.
Mhm.
Let's see what else. Man, there are so many little things to call out. I think a common question that comes up for COVID era events is how crowded was it? Was it totally empty? Was it super crowded? I kind of feel like it was both at different times, right? There were times when I felt it got pretty crowded on the exhibit floor. I was sort of surprised. I thought it would be kind of sparse throughout, but there were definitely times that I was having to sort of navigate through pretty sizable crowds on the exhibit floor.
Yeah, around like 2ish,
Yeah,
around like like early afternoon.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
It got
yeah.
pretty crowded, and like some of the booths, definitely around. There was this one booth, like kind of unfortunately, there was only like one or two vendors with actual comics, and
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
actually a line at one point to get in because it was like just too crowded in this small little booth. And of
Mm,
course, when you have like all these comics, you want to like you're looking for them and you thumb through them because it was all single issues.
right.
And like some lanes ended up like some lanes of vendors ended up looking too crowded. So I definitely look at a lane and be like, oh, I'll go down that a little later. That's a little too crowded.
Mm-hmm.
But of course,
Yeah.
like early in the day, later in the day, and pretty much all day Sunday, it was pretty sparse.
Yeah. 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 I noticed that too. And similarly with the panels, there were panels, there were people speaking in person. The panels were mostly pretty sparse, but not all of them, you know. I think notably the masquerade cosplay event was pretty heavily attended. There were a lot of people who showed up for that. And I guess we should call that out. You know, what was the focus of the convention? Like you were saying, there weren't many actual comic books on the exhibit floor. Um, this is different from years past. You know, there have been a lot of comic book vendors in this con's history. This past weekend, not many at all. I think there
Yeah.
were all of two vendors with comics,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like they had a ton of comics either. So yeah, not a whole lot of comics, and I think it turned out to be a pretty heavily cosplay focused
Mm-hmm.
convention. Yeah, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, cosplay. There were a lot of vendors that were just like props
Yeah,
and things like that, stuff for your cosplay. And of course, like a sizable chunk of fan art.
yeah.
Lot,
Oh, sure.
but that's
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of it seems to be that's consistent
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is the fan art. It's probably easy to get vendors because it's just one artist,
Right.
um, and who probably doesn't really have a storefront. So,
Yeah,
but
and I think the panels were kind of geared towards cosplay and kind of maker type material. Um, it's just cool, you know. I think you know a convention doesn't have to be just one thing. But we're saying that this con was kind of diminished in a lot of ways. Um, and I would say diminished in some ways more than others, right? I think the cosplay aspect um, was pretty strong, and that might speak to the future of this convention. This might be um, like a big cosplay convention moving forward, like cosplay slash maker convention, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I the more I think about it, we're all hoping that this will kind of come back to what the convention was in its early years, but I think more realistically, they're probably going to look at, you know, what worked most recently and kind of focus on that. And yeah, I don't think we're going to see the huge crowds and the big name guests anytime too soon.
You're
Yeah,
probably right.
yeah,
Um, oh, actually, something I guess I can go off of that.
yeah.
This might be taken in a bit different direction, but there's a couple things I think I noticed. Generally by like what's on the floor and like what people are cosplaying. And I think that's kind of like you can kind of use those to kind of get like a general like pulse of like kind of what's hot, what's not. Like of course with
Mm-hmm.
cosplay, you always have every year you see a lot of Harley Quinn, you see a lot of Spider-Man, you see a lot of Deadpool with always like some of the more higher ups with like Batman, Iron Man, of course, and the 501st made an appearance.
Yep.
Um, and those are like kind of they're almost like little mainstays, but you can kind of tell like what cosplays get more and more popular each year.
Yeah.
Whereas like one year, of course, you see a lot of Deadpools right around the time Deadpool came out. Um, and so like this, like like in terms of what's hot, like the thing I noticed far and away the most with cosplay and fan art was the anime Demon Slayer.
Mm.
Like I saw a lot of Demon Slayer cosplay, like a whole lot, like of the main character Tanjiro and his like kind of green checkered robe. I saw like pretty much everywhere. That which kind of I guess speaks to kind of just the massive runaway success of the movie, Japan's most successful movie. Um, but also what's interesting in terms of what's not that I've noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So in previous years, like one of the biggest cosplay and fan art attractions was the video game Overwatch. Um,
Oh, yeah.
the big shooter game with like all these different kinds of characters, and then like it's an American game made by, of course, Blizzard Entertainment, major company, pulls from a lot of anime, so it kind of like there's definitely a crossover with that crowd aesthetically. But this year, there was zero Overwatch fan art,
Hmm.
zero Overwatch cosplay, and that is because very recently, within past couple months, I think at this point, I kind of forgot. I stopped paying attention to the story, but they've kind of under very very serious sexual harassment allegations.
Mm.
Like, very serious. Like the head of the company stepped down, and they're going through like a major restructuring because of their extremely toxic work culture. And so that mixed with a lot of other very bad news that's happened to Blizzard in the past 2 weeks, I think has just killed a lot of momentum for Overwatch, killed a lot of and many other games, which includes some of the biggest games ever made, World of Warcraft, for one. And so I just thought like that was just kind of interesting to see, like just two things I noticed just generally of kind of what I saw amongst the crowd, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, some cool observations there, Christian. Yeah, man. I would say con goers are some of the most informed fans out there, right? We keep an eye on what's going on in the culture, right? If there's some problematic behavior, we're certainly aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is pretty interesting that, you saw that big void of
Yeah.
Overwatch stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because it used to be all over. Like 2019, Overwatch fan art was everywhere. Be a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
posing in front as like the different characters.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No one wants to touch that anymore. No one wants to go anywhere near Blizzard.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that is a fun thing to do. I do that also. I kind of keep an eye on what's popular in cosplay. One thing I noticed was Loki cosplay. I saw a lot of
ooh, yeah.
Loki stuff. Yeah.
That's another one. Yeah, I noticed that a
Yeah.
lot too.
Yeah. Not just the character Loki, but I would say the show Loki, right? I saw a bunch of Lokis. I saw some Sylvies. I saw some of the TVA. The show was repping hard at
Mm-hmm.
SiliCon. And yeah, I would say, yeah, the MCU was pretty well represented in general. Pretty cool seeing a bunch of Shang-Chi cosplayers. That movie is literally releasing right now, and pretty cool to see some fans getting into it there. But yeah, I think the Loki aspect to it really jumped out at me though, because I saw a lot of Loki
Yeah.
cosplay, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of our favorite costumes that we saw. Any
Hmm.
favorites of yours?
Let's see. The big fan favorite at the like cosplay contest that we went to was the Godzilla one, which is really cool.
Yes.
Another professional one that I saw that was really well done was someone did Gundam Wing, the mech suit from it.
Oh yeah.
Um, One I couldn't get a picture of, I saw in a distance. Um, was someone did an Animal Crossing character, something else that came out this year that was really big. Um,
Right.
her name's Daisy May. She comes every Sunday morning and sells you turnips, and the turnips act as a stock market within the game where they have fluctuating prices, and you like talk to people on other islands to try to see what the price is to sell for the highest. And so I noticed that, and they had like the hat, and they had the whole outfit, and I thought that was really cool, and that was pretty unique.
Nice.
Oh, and I guess here's a funny little cosplay story. Since you were Baron Zemo, um, we were walking around the floor and we all agreed to meet at one spot at one point, and then I see Baron Zemo walking over, and I didn't know that you changed out of your Baron Zemo costume. So me and the other two people I were with at the time were like, "Oh, hey, Henry," like, and he didn't have the scarf, but I just saw the purple mask, and I just assumed it was you. and and poor guy, he just kind of waved, "Hey," and just kind of kept walking. Weirdos.
Things that happen at comic
Mm-hmm.
conventions. These
Yeah.
things do happen. It's funny. I did see this guy later, and the mask was very similar. It might have been like the exact same mask. Very, very well could have been. Um, but I was wondering, I've been wondering if he was thinking the exact same thing as me. And that was, well, I'm going to be masked anyway. So if I'm going to do a cosplay, maybe I'll do a cosplay that has a mask in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the wearing a mask is, no one's going to see it. It's like part of the
Yeah,
costume, right?
it's part
So
of it. It doesn't take away
I,
from it.
I'm guessing his thought process is along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yes, there was not one, but rather two Zemos at SiliCon.
Hey.
Yeah.
Um,
But good call outs. I definitely noticed the Gundam cosplay and the Godzilla cosplay, both really awesome. There was also a really cool team of Mortal Kombat cosplayers,
oh
and
yeah,
that was pretty impressive. Like
that
they
was
brought
yeah.
their A game. Yeah, it was really cool. They had this boombox with them, and they were blasting the Mortal Kombat theme song too.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty awesome, gotta say. So yeah, on the cosplay front, on that front, the convention did not disappoint for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And
So what else? Yeah, any other highlights? Any specific highlights we want to call out?
oh yeah, I guess or I want to take a quick second to shout out a couple like really good vendors
Cool.
that I got. Um, first off is Thornhill Gaming. So they do a bunch of stuff like dice boxes, dice bags, dice towers for mostly Dungeons and Dragons. And so I got a really cool like laser etched um, Witcher themed dice box from them that had like the Witcher symbol on the logo, and then all around the side you had all the Witcher signs. Um, and I thought that was just really cool. I love Magic the Gathering, and like it's definitely perfect for that. Definitely to keep like a bunch of my dice together.
Excellent.
Let's see. There were also some really great fan arts. A couple that I noted were a couple that I got some prints were Edwin Huang and let's see Levy Craig and uh, another one that I do really like is the soda company that was there. It was a Wild Bill's Old Fashioned Soda. What they have is you buy the mug, which I actually bought last year and I brought on Sunday, and you have so this is kind of instead of having water, you have to buy soda. And so, but it's amazing soda. They have like really good root beer, orange soda, cherry. This really good called sarsaparilla soda,
Mm.
and it's like some of the best I've ever had. Like really well made, and um, I got a straw so I could like drink through my mask. So I could just kind of like shove them. I could like just pull it a little bit, get the straw in, and take a quick sip.
Nice.
And so those were some of my favorite vendors this year.
That's cool. Yeah, mentioned it before, but huge shout out to all the vendors that showed up, Shout out to all the guests. Like, this is not an easy thing to do, right? So yeah, I really appreciate just everyone who was there. Thank you for being there. Thank you for making the most of things. um yeah, a couple highlights I wanted to call out were the panels. The panels were cool. Notably, there was one panel that Gail Simone, the comics writer Gail Simone, was on. It was a spotlight panel on her, and very cool. Like, they covered her process, a lot of her experiences, a lot of her unique takes on things. And she's just a really interesting person, a great comics writer. And yeah, we were kind of mentioning how there really weren't a whole lot of prominent guests. This was a great guest,
She
you know.
was, yeah.
Yeah, especially for comics people like you and I. We were kind of feel like we kind of felt like comics were lacking on the exhibit floor and the guests. But to have a very veteran and established and cool comics writer like Gail Simone, that was like a big plus. So great panel. And another interesting panel we went to was the Comedio Comedy Showcase. A comedy showcase at a comic convention, right? Seemed kind of odd, but we went and I thought it was great. I thought it was hilarious. There were a lot of great comedians, and it made me think that they should continue doing these at comic conventions. Like, the format seemingly doesn't really fit a comic convention. Like, historically, comedy is best done in a dark nightclub with like a 2-drink minimum and all this kind of stuff, right? To me, like, the success of this panel kind of told me that, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. Like, they can actually do this at a convention. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is the caliber of comedian that they had. Like, all the comedians they had were all pretty good. So there was that. But I do think that stand-up comedy at a comic convention can work. So it seemed like kind of a weird experiment, but I think ultimately a successful one, because I was like, why don't they do this more? This is cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I also think it's a great avenue to tell like really, really nerdy jokes. There was like a
Yeah.
really great bit that one comic had talking about pushing the buttons on Darth Vader's chest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was hilarious. Like,
Hilarious.
he told like all these Star Wars jokes that were amazing.
Yeah, you have this built-in knowledge base with the audience, right? So yeah, it's sort of a shorthand for these geeky comics, right? So yeah, it definitely can and did work. So what else? Any other notable highlights over the weekend?
Let's see. Um, as far as other panels that we went to, there was an interesting panel about on Sunday about AI like essentially taking over the world, kind of like in a science fiction movie.
Mhm.
Um, and what that could look like. Where the speaker went through the history of AI and how it's changed and what it looks like today, and gave like a bit of a take on like what it could look like in the future. It's not going to look like Terminator, and it's probably going to be I don't think I can think of a sci-fi movie that's like it. Or actually, it might be more like the movie Her, if you've seen that movie.
Oh yeah.
Than something like I said, Terminator, where you have like an Arnold Schwarzenegger type guy mowing people down. It might be more like people interacting with AI in a much a much deeper way. So that was pretty interesting. The cosplay contest, it was cool to see everybody walk across the stage. We got there a little late, but someone kind of went into the process of making their costume, and I thought that was fun. And it was like one of the biggest events, so it was just in like a very big room, so that was pretty nice to just
Yeah.
be a part of. To be a part of.
Yeah.
And then I think also on Sunday, we ended up actually sitting on the Lana Parrilla panel. They're pretty much their biggest guest,
Mm-hmm.
and a friend in our group had seen the first couple seasons of Once Upon a Time, but myself and Porfirio, we did not. So we really didn't see anything that she was in. But she definitely had a following. A lot of people asked her a lot of questions, and it was just nice to be like in the moment, you know, kind of like outward looking in.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, I think those were some of the other highlight panels that we went to. Although we really didn't go to too many this year.
Mm-hmm.
It was only like a few. We may have went to one or two more that I can't really remember.
Yeah. I wanted to call out too some little things. There were some old traditions that came up. Like we ended up parking at the same parking garage that we always park at every year. So going back there had kind of a cool nostalgic feel to it, even though it sounds kind of strange, but like just the act of parking was kind of fun. And you and we went through the weapons check, which was kind of silly because you had a question mark plastic cane and I had this tiny bright orange pistol. I mean, neither of which were like dangerous in any way, but we were flagged and we were directed to the weapons check area where we had to put like a plastic zip tie on
Huh.
our lethal weapon. Right?
Maybe it's because they knew we were villains.
Yeah, there you go.
What's in
Yeah,
that cane?
yeah. These guys look
Hold up.
dangerous. But just doing that was kind of fun too. Just being a part of it. Like, okay, I'm at a real convention. I actually had to do a weapons check. Cool. So yeah, just little things like that. I don't know, just roaming the exhibit floor, like something I haven't done in ages, and just that act alone was a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah, just being in the like environment of the
Yeah.
con
Yeah.
is really the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
part, and really it can give off a real high sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like we've been saying, we don't want to harp on the negatives too much. And we've definitely already mentioned some of the not so cool stuff of this past weekend. But anything negative come up for you? Anything not so cool? Any low lights?
Not really that I haven't mentioned already, or if there would be, it'd be just something I thought would whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So nothing that we haven't said already, I guess.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last thing anyone wants to hear right now is more talk about COVID and how shitty it is and how it's ruined a lot of stuff. Um, but yeah, I think it needs to be said that there was a bit of a dark cloud on this convention. I think, not calling out COVID specifically, but there was this feeling, certainly with me, I'm sure I wasn't alone. There's this feeling that, you know, what could have been, right? Because if a lot more people were better about getting vaccinated, etc., etc. When this convention actually happened, late August 2021, it very well could have been a back to normal kind of event, right? As it was, and with the Delta and all this kind of stuff, it wasn't. So it was just this feeling of what could have been, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been really amazing. As it was kind of like just enough to get us by and, bring back these nice feelings of, oh yeah, what an in-person con can be. But it was just like scratching the surface, really, right? And maybe more of a preview of bigger things to come rather than being the main event itself, right? That might be the best summation, right? This really wasn't the main event convention we were all hoping for. Rather, it was just a little taste of it and a little taste of what we might see in the future. So, yeah, I think we've covered most of what we've wanted to cover. But yeah, any final thoughts?
Hmm. I I guess all I can say is it was nice that that happened this year, and I hope by around this time next year we will be back to this normal, and we will have that big triumphant return to Comic Con that we were all hoping for in the first place.
Yeah,
With all the big guests, all the big comic vendors, all of our old favorites, and that we'll be here around this time next year talking about, man, this was amazing. But for now,
yeah,
this was a nice holdover. It
yeah,
was nice to get that feeling and that environment for a little bit. A nice little bright spot in a pretty dark couple years.
yeah. And if you want to look at some of the brighter side of things, one perspective you could take is the people who did show up again. Adam Savage, the attendees, the guests, the vendors, you know, showing up and trying to make the most of things. Maybe this year wasn't the big event we're all hoping for, but the select few who did show up, including ourselves, maybe made it possible for this convention to live on, right? Maybe you can think of it as, well, we kind of had to grind through a somewhat rough con in order to have the con live on to greater glory in the
Mm-hmm.
future, right?
The best is yet to come.
Indeed, indeed. So stay positive. We'll get through this, and yeah, I think the future is bright. Think things will get better, and yeah, I think not just this convention. I think just life in general will will uh, will get brighter. We'll get there. All right. With that, we can wrap up the episode. This is Farewell from Henry and Christian.